And the Speaker in the House of Commons has that responsibility for keeping order in a way that doesn't apply in the House of Lords. The House of Lords is largely self-regulating, and so the Lord Speaker provides procedural advice and guidance to members and announces the results of votes and has an important role as an ambassador for the House of Lords, as the Speaker does for the House of Commons. But the Lord Speaker doesn't have that referee role in the way that I, as Speaker, have in the Commons. The Speaker of the House of Commons is indeed not appointed but elected, and that's long been the case. What's changed in recent times is that the Speaker of the House of Commons is now elected by secret ballot of the whole House whenever there is a vacancy for the election of Speaker. So when there is a vacancy, there is a period in which candidates can declare themselves. They have to be nominated by a number of members from different political parties, and once the nominations have closed, there is then a period in which campaigning takes place. Speeches are made on the day of the election in the chamber by the candidates in support of their candidatures, and there is then a secret ballot. And once one candidate has more than 50% of the vote, he or she is elected. For the record, I was elected on the 22nd of June 2009. There were 10 candidates, of whom I was one, and we had 3 rounds before I was fortunate enough to be elected.
He sits and he determines who is called to speak, because sometimes more people wish to speak than there is time. He makes sure that the rules of Parliament are observed, and he, of course, ultimately decides what the result of a vote in Parliament should be. And on the very rare occasions when the number of people voting for and against a proposal is exactly the same, it is the Speaker who can use his casting vote to decide the outcome.
The role of the Speaker is limited to some extent. The Speaker, of course, is the servant of Parliament, not its master. And I remember very well when I became Speaker, I said to the clerk, I'm not going to wear the full-bottomed wig, you know. He said, Madam Speaker, you are not the boss. You must remember the words of Speaker Lenthal in 1600. He said, I've only eyes to see and ears to hear as this house bids me whose servant I am. You will never forget. You're the servant of this house, and we will seek permission for the house for you not to wear the wig. And I got permission for the House. So that brought me down to size, as it should do every Speaker, that they are the servant of the House, and his job, her job, is to conduct debates, is to see that they are conducted in a fair and impartial manner, to see that winner does not take all in a democracy, and that the people in the opposition have a right to be heard and a right to speak, particularly at question time when they are scrutinising government ministers. The Speaker's role, of course, is also a representative one. Represents the House in this country at various institutions, educational, industrial, commercial, all sorts of organisations, but also represents this Parliament, the Parliament abroad at international gatherings. So he has an international role as well as the domestic one.
The Speaker of the House of Lords is very different to the Speaker of the House of Commons, and a lot of people ask, what does the Speaker do? Because they don't choose who's going to speak, they don't try and keep order, even when perhaps it might be helpful if they did. But they're elected. The Speaker of the House of Lords is elected by the members of the House of Lords.
The Lord Speaker represents the whole House. It is definitely non-political, and therefore it is able to represent all parties and all groupings within the House. My main tasks are to represent the House to the external world, but in particular to try to use quite an extensive outreach programme that we have here in the House of Lords in order to explain to a much wider public, but especially young people, the role of the House of Lords.